Welcome, everybody. My name is Terry Angelos. This is Fintech Perspectives. And at Visa, we're in this privileged position to work with an incredible set of fintech partners and entrepreneurs. And today, I'm delighted to introduce Misha Esipov from Nova Credit. Hey, Misha.
Terry, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
So, Misha, can you just sort of tell us, a bit about yourself and your journey at Nova Credit?
Sure. I'm originally from Russia. I was, born in the old Soviet Union back in the day. Moved to the States as a kid when I was about 2.5. Grew up mix of East Coast, West Coast. Worked in New York for just under a decade, and then spent the last 6 years in California, where I started Nova Credit, and I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of the business.
Yeah, I think the first time we met was through an introduction from Elad Gil, and met with you and I think Nikki in our sort of new digs in one market in San Francisco. And that was back in 2017 when the company was just getting off the ground.
The good old days. Yeah, I think we might have had maybe 4 or 5, 6 people in the company at the time. I remember, walking into your offices and just being so bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and eager to tell the story.
Well, actually, why don't you tell us, what has happened since? What does Nova Credit do, and sort of tell us where you guys are on your journey?
Yeah, so Nova Credit, we've been around for about almost 5 years now. We're a fintech company based out of California, offices in New York as well, and the problem that we first set out to solve was the problem of financial access for immigrants and newcomers and folks that are new to the U.S. Financial system. And the basic problem is that when every year several million people move to the U.S., that population of folks represents the majority of U.S. population growth. And when they first arrive in this country, they have to start over, right? They have to find a place to live. They got to find their first banking relationship. They have to get their first credit relationships. And when they apply for credit, the bank or issuer will check their U.S. bureau, and their U.S. bureau is empty. It doesn't exist because they just got here. And so now we've spent the better part of 5 years going all around the world and effectively building an aggregation layer on top of the world's credit reporting industry. And in doing so, we allow for people to move their financial identity, move their credit history with them as they move around the world. And we call that product the credit passport. The same way that your passport is your key to entry to a new country, your credit passport is how you access financial services around the world.
And tell me, why is this a hard problem? I mean, if I were to open up a bank account and apply for credit, can't my U.S. bank just call up somebody in South Africa?
Yeah, I mean, if only it were so easy. It's an incredibly difficult problem to solve for a whole host of reasons. I think in part because of just how fragmented the world is and how fragmented as a result the world's credit information is. So 20 years ago, I don't know how long ago Terry, you moved to the US, but 20 years ago, the world only had about 25 credit bureaus. And now there are, I believe, over 250 credit bureaus all around the world. So the availability of credit reporting particularly in emerging as well as developed economies all around the world is a relatively new thing. And part of the reason for why we exist is that, building data integrations with credit bureaus all around the world is a lot of work. And it's so much work that any single bank doesn't, is kind of shies away from solving the problem themselves. And so we've sort of emerged as a one-stop shop where we've got data access in over 20 markets around the world. And those markets send roughly 60% of the annual inflow of immigrants to the US every year.
Oh, wow. And can you give me a sense for, what kind of information do credit bureaus collect around the world that maybe we don't have in the US? I mean, is this a standard set of information or does it vary across those 250 credit bureaus that have emerged in the last 20 years?
There's a fair bit of variance, but the core underlying information is substantially the same. I think the biggest difference that exists around the world is whether a credit reporting regime is a positive reporting environment or a negative reporting environment. So in the US here, we have a positive reporting environment, meaning the good and the bad is reported to the bureaus, whereas in a number of economies like in Brazil and Germany and Australia is actually now transitioning to positive. They only report the negative, so only if you are, only if you default or are derogatory. Part of the secret sauce, part of what we've spent so much time doing is standardizing the world's credit information, working with Experian and Equifax and TransUnion and CRIF and Credit Info and various independent bureaus around the world, and putting in the hard work to ensure that a report from India looks and feels like a report from the UK, like a report from Canada, like a US report.
One of the things that we're seeing at Visa is most fintech companies have started on debit and prepaid. That's an easier regulatory framework, under which to operate. But we're starting to see those companies that have now got a fairly large set of customers begin to explore credit. Companies like Chime, who've got a substantial, user base in the US, now have a secured credit card. Companies like Upgrade, who started with personal loans, are now adding credit. If there are fintechs or banks who want to access this immigrant community, how do they work with Nova Credit?
Start by just sending me an email, misha@novacredit.com. But in practice, the way the capability works is, we help create a user experience that allows consumers to access their information from their home country, and then we deliver that information in a compliant manner in real time through an API. And so we're able to take this highly attractive yet underserved credit community from being rejected by virtue of being a no file or a thin file and get them approved.
And so actually that's, really interesting. You mentioned that this is a, highly attractive community. Certainly, I think some of the data suggests that, immigrants, certainly when they arrive here, are disproportionately successful. How should a fintech looking at their credit portfolio think about immigrants?
I mean, if you really take a long-term outlook on US demographics, it's really hard to ignore this segment. I mean, as I alluded to earlier, the immigrant segment accounts for about 55% of US population growth. You fast forward 20, 30 years, the US Census Bureau expects the immigrant population to drive 80% of US population growth. So as you think about being a fintech or even a bank and looking for where is the blue ocean, where are the most exciting high value accounts to go out and win, it is this segment. In any given year, there are more immigrants who enter the US financial system than there are Americans who turn 18 and become eligible for financial products.
And which companies do you have data and operate in? And then I'm curious which of those are sort of your largest source of new customers.
So in terms of where we're accessing data, I mean, it's the big markets that send the most people to the US, where we're seeing the most volume, right? So it's folks from India, it's Mexico, it's the UK, it's Canada, it's Australia, it's Brazil, it's Nigeria. Those markets together account for nearly half of the immigrant base that's coming into the US each year. And then in terms of distribution and the major partners that we work with, we're primarily focused on credit cards as well as student loans.
Pretty curious, in the last year, we sort of asked this question to many of our CEOs. What has been the impact of COVID? We've obviously had people that are traveling less. I imagine immigration, has been impacted. What's been the impact of COVID on Nova Credit and your clients?
Yeah, I mean, to put it quite bluntly, a pandemic is kind of a perfect storm for a global credit bureau, where in a pandemic, national borders tend to freeze up, and the pace of globalization and people moving around the world slowed down to record levels. So last year was a hard year for sure. We saw a lot of our volumes kind of stall out for a few months in some of those dark months, but fortunately, come September, October, November, we started setting new highs again. But I think on the flip side of such a hard period for, I think, a lot of businesses in this country, it forced us to really think about the long term and accelerate a lot of our product roadmap and starting to expand how we think about how we can create value and how we can create more more financial access. And so 2020 was a year for us where we started to expand our product suite from only focusing on global credit bureau to also starting to think about and work with various forms of alternative data that can be permissioned and brought forward through consumers opting in to being able to put their best foot forward in the middle of a credit application.
Oh, that's super interesting. So can you say just a bit more about that? So as a consumer, if there's other data about me that I want to make available to my financial institution, I can do so through Nova Credit?
Yeah. So I mean, that's the core of how the credit passport works. We can access data from around the world, and we're increasingly building partnerships and integrations with a range of US data sources to, on the fly at the moment that a consumer needs to be approved most, which is in the middle of an application journey, we can give them the tooling to access a range of other data sources of information and get approved on the spot, even in scenarios where their US bureau may be lacking. Yeah.
And maybe just one question going back to the way that banks and fintechs integrate Nova Credit. Do they control the consumer experience during application, and it's just the information flow that's going through your API? Like, what does that application process look like if I'm importing my passport from some other bureau?
We have a range of integration models. Some require basically no technical integrations. Others, are like gold standard integration, involves actually inserting a piece of technology in the middle of an application journey. And that allows a consumer to opt in and self-select that, I'm Terry, I'm from South Africa, and here's a little bit of information about me. And let me prove that I am who I say I am. And then that's it. That's the end of the experience. We then, with your consent, go and fetch the information, transform it, run some math on it, do some analytics, make it compliant, and deliver it back end to our partners to allow them to then read that information and get somebody approved.
So Misha, as folks who are listening in, what are some of the example segments that you guys have focused on, outside of just cards?
So over the years, we've worked in a range of areas. I think it really comes back to understanding the user problem, right? When somebody first moves to the US, they have to completely reset, right? You have to often learn a new language. You have to retrain yourself professionally. And then on top of that, you have to reestablish all of your finances. So you have to open up the checking account. So we work with a variety of card providers to help them KYC this segment and being able to instantly approve them or open up accounts digitally. We work in cards, we work in student loans to help international students get student loans, both on the refi side and on the in-school side. We started doing a little bit of work on the personal loan side, a little bit in auto. And then also outside of pure financial services, we also work in the telecom space, so helping people get device financing and onto postpaid plans, as well as a little bit of work in tenant screening.
That's great. I mean, this is going to be a fascinating space to watch. Certainly one of the trends we're seeing is credit is being unbundled from the credit card. If you look at the buy now, pay later space, there's credit at the point of sale, and we think there'll be more and more places where organizations will be asking the question of, can I lend to this individual in a more sort of micro capacity? So certainly excited and interested to see how you guys might adapt to that.
I'll throw out a crazy idea on that one, if I will, which is that as more and more of commerce moves online, e-commerce sites now have to not only handle demand from within their country, so from the US, but also potentially demand internationally. But financing for that international demand on e-commerce sites doesn't really exist, right? The buy now, pay later providers are really focused on pulling data in the US and therefore supporting financing for US buyers. I think there's a whole opportunity out there, which I haven't really seen many players go after, to help international buyers buy products and get financing for products online.
Yeah, that's super fascinating, Misha. We constantly see this at Visa, where global businesses run into the structural borders of finance. So, exactly what you've described as a global e-commerce business, comfortable with lending, but is operating within the confines of the financial walls that I think have existed for good reason. The data laws are different, the credit bureau laws are different, et cetera, et cetera. So to the degree that you guys can act as a translation layer in that world, that's super exciting. And we'll hopefully that crazy idea is one that we see soon at an e-commerce site. Okay, so I wanted to ask you just a couple of questions in a sort of lightning round way, so you don't have to think about this too much. But what is the one thing that is misunderstood in your market?
I think a lot of people, when they hear the word immigrant, really focus on, I think, very narrow pieces of the immigrant segment. I think the immigrant segment is very broad. I think there are people that come to this country on a documented basis, and those that come on an undocumented basis. There are those that come for work, those that come for education, those that come for love. Those are kind of the three personas that we talk about. But the vast majority of the immigrant segment is actually very well educated, very high earning, and an incredibly good customer to win. And I think a lot of our first conversations with banks really think about the immigrant segment as a very deep subprime segment, but in reality, it has a range of personas in it, and a lot of the segment is very prime to super prime.
What advice would you give to a fintech founder just starting out today?
Be prepared to spend 10 years of your life on it. I think building enduring companies that have systemic impact on the world takes a long time. And if you're looking for a quick win of, a few years in and get out, like that's just is harder and harder to find. And so be prepared and be excited and feel galvanized about spending the next chapter of your life, the next 10 years of your life working on a problem. And if that doesn't feel authentic to you, then it's not the right space for you to be working on, because success or fail, moving in that direction, like you should be excited about that path, about the journey, because it takes a long time to build a company that can endure, especially in the financial services space. We have heard that a lot. So we will, hopefully folks listening in will take that to heart. And then maybe a last question, what surprised you sort of most about working in the credit bureau / payments industry? I'm always amazed at just how long everything takes. If I'm just brutally honest, I think our business on one side, we work with credit bureaus to access information, and with large financial institutions on the other, and we sort of sit in between as an intermediary. And it takes a long time to build these relationships, to affect change, to make arguments around how consumer permission data is a thing, that people have a right to their information and they should have a right to it. And it just takes a lot of time and a lot of cycles and a lot of perseverance and patience. I think that's coming back to one of your earlier questions, why having systemic impact and building an enduring business takes so long. Well, thanks, Misha. That's terrific, and really enjoyed having you on Fintech Perspectives. Wish you guys all the best of luck, and thank you for taking time. My pleasure. Honor to be here.